Shalom, Rastafari. This is Wendim, Yadon. It's a message I wanted to record from earlier. Some of the resources right here. Let's speak by Egyptian Yoga. This particular volume by Muwatta Ashby and edited by Karen Clark Ashby, his wife. And one will say, Egyptian yoga? I mean, yoga, what does that have to do with Metafkedus? What does that have to do with the Bible? What does that have to do with His Imperial Majesty? And we want to show a link, like what's in a word. This is the Go-Hymn, or the Gospel of His Imperial Majesty. You can get a copy of this, where we deal with where we present the basic teachings of His Imperial Majesty in regards to Jesus Christos, the cornerstone, the rock, the bedrock, the foundation of I and I faith as true and faithful Rastafari. But of course one will say, well, what does that have to do with His Imperial Majesty? What does that have to do with our Godfather, the King of Kings, of Haile, Selassie? No doubt you may have read, and those who haven't will seek to present it. We presented it elsewhere, where His Imperial Majesty speaks on the word. And he says no matter what language it might be written in or translated in, the word remains one and the same. Some novices and unlearned, that are unstable and unlearned, they wrestle at that word, and they think that His Majesty is speaking that all the translations of the Bible are essentially of equal caliber, that there's nothing about a pure language or original manuscript or the purity of the original Afro-Shemitic. But that's not true. When he says the word, he's speaking of Jesus Christos. He's speaking of Adonai Yeshua. He's speaking of the Son of God, the Bein Ha-Elohim. And that should become clear by the context. But still, the question will remain, what does that have to do with Egyptian yoga? This is the key word right here, yoga. And now we have right here, this is the Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, right? And although we do not acknowledge that English is our language, although our ancestors was forced to, how to make a slave. But what's interesting, those who would claim English as their language don't really know what's in the word, like what it means. Those folks who say we are American, and they speak so-called English. That's why the English in England laugh and call it American English, because, folks are so miseducated or miseducated, whatever, This is why I think foreigners do well, because they're coming to a strange culture, and at least they learn, while folks who have been born here and talk about generations of American or Westerners or so-called Negroes, they don't even look these things up. But let's go through this for a moment. Yoga. This is why we like these particular dictionaries, with these etymological bracket. You see right here, this double bracket right here. Yoga. This is the definition, right? This is the diction, how to spell it. Yoga. Yoga, right? The noun, part of speech. Then open etymological bracket, and it says san for Sanskrit. It means union, right? Literally, it's a yoking, right? A yoking. See the base, yoke. Oh, did I first go to the Metafkedus, to the Bible, to the scripture right here? This is what His Imperial Majesty quotes in that particular speech I alluded to just previously, where he says, he quotes Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, where it says, come to me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Then at the end of His Imperial Majesty's quotation, he asks, who can resist an invitation so full of compassion? Either a fool or an unrepentant sinner or a devil or someone. Who can resist an invitation? Which invitation? It's this invitation, a new message of the essence, not the kingdom, but personal discipleship, personal discipline. So in the video, our main Rastafari, the mystery school, the Heru Christos, or the Horus Christ teaching, some might find it kind of strange from a Western Gentile perspective, but this is why we're studying I roots and I culture. So here's now the link with yoga. The key word right here, where he says, come to I, right? Or come to me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, right? Heavily burdened. There's a lot of people heavily burdened souls, right? And I will give you rest. Now, if we read a little bit further on in this new message of Jesus, this new message of Yeshua, he says in verse 29, take my yoke. See that word right there? Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. Right? This is what the Bible teaches, not what your church, what your pastor, preacher, or bishop, Reverend Bacon, Pastor Pork Chops, or Bishop Bullshit has taught you. But this is the word. That's why it says study and show yourself approved to God as a workman or woman that need not be ashamed. And these ones who have spread lies in the good Lord's name and in Jesus' name and everything, they must be brought to shame. Right? Because they were the ones who were supposed to be teaching you. Otherwise, ones and ones like I wouldn't have to be doing these vids in the middle of the night, because we know it's so necessary for ones to know the truth. So he says, take my yoke. This is speaking to all of us. Take my yoke upon you. You is you and me is I, and learn of me. That learn of the truth, not just going to church on a Sunday and clap hands and so-called pseudo-prosperity pimps and go spell. You understand? They can't even spell. Otherwise, they would know what that yoke is, and they would have taught on it. Take my yoke, Yeshua says, Yesu says, upon you, upon I, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart. And ye, y'all, us, I, you and me, shall find rest for your souls, really for your soul, for our psyche, for our feeling, our thought, our mind, right? These illusions of Babylon, all this confusion, watching this stuff about the so-called Sandy hoax, and this is crazy, but this is all part of what they call trauma-based mind control. This is the antidote, right, to Satan's wicked joke, right? He says, my yoke, right, is what? Easy. And my burden is light. Light, not light like, physical light or illumination light, but it's not heavy, right? It's not heavy like what the, Pastor Bacon, Reverend Pork Chops, and Bishop Bullshit be telling y'all, right? So this is the new message. Before the kingdom, there must be personal, that means I, and I discipleship. Now, here's the link with the roots, right? Egyptian yoga. It's in this word right here, yoga. Not so much from what's here is just the Hindu discipline, right? Even though we find the same things within the scriptures, but in the light of Christ. But when we go down to the word yoke. Now, you see this right here? Remember what the Bible talks about, do not be unequally yoked? And we have this picture we got from the internet where you see a donkey and an ox. You know what I mean? A donkey and an ox. Now, though that may be comical, right, many are unequally yoked, right? Ones who are worldly, ones who are spiritual, ones who serve Satan, and ones who want to serve God, unequally yoked. Right? This is properly yoked right here. You see these two bulls, right? Equally yoked. But what does yoke mean? Before getting into all that, what does yoke mean? So we have the same thing here, yoke, plural yokes, or yoke. So the yokes, right? Then it says right here, open etymological bracket, ME, Middle English, YOK, yoke. I think this means derived from Old English, geok, Geoc, akin to the German yoke, or yoke, right? JOCH, derived from IE, Indo-European, Yugo, right? Yugo, right? There you go, right? There you go. It says Sanskrit, Yuga, right? Sanskrit, Yuga, Jungere, so forth and so on. Let's get to the base, right? Old Slav, that's where slave come from, Slavic, right? Nothing to do with African. Actually, white people were enslaving each other, right? And they got to unite themselves when they made a deal with the devil and created white supremacy. And then they cast the Slav name on African people, on Hebrews and Beta Israel. Well, that's another related matter. But the base right there is from this U, U-Y-E-U, which means to join, right? To join. Now, it's interesting because Christ says, take my what? Yoke, right? That yoke, you already saw it right there when we went to, where was it? Right here. Yuga is one and the same with this yoga, right? Yoga, which is a yoke, a discipline. Let's read a little bit more. They say mystic and ascetic Hindu discipline by which one seeks to achieve liberation of self, which is like the soul, the psyche, and union with the what? Supreme Spirit. They say after crucifixion, Jesus Christ, Yeshua, is not just flesh and blood, but he's the life-giving what? The Spirit, the chosen one, the Haru, right? With the Supreme Spirit or universal soul through intense concentration, right? Focus of mind, deep meditation, and practices. That's what the Christians are missing, the yoke of Christ. The practices, right? Practices involving prescribed postures, and this is the Hindu, controlled breathing, so forth and so on. Secondarily, it's a system, right, of exercising involving the postures, breathing, practiced in this discipline. So basically the root is a discipline. So this is where yoga, right, and yoke, right, are one and the same from this root, yoga and yoke. And once again, right here, the red letter, take my what? Yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest to your soul. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Let's go to verse 28 for a moment. You see the subscription to this is Schofield Study Bible. Let's go to the footnote. I found this interesting. They said the new message of Jesus, of Jesus, right? The rejected king, as Kedamawi Haile Selassie, right? The rejected king of kings, right? The rejected king, right? The rejected king now turns from the rejecting nation, right? Sounds like what? Ethiopia, black folks, and offers not the kingdom, right? But rest, the Shabbat, but rest and service, the ministry to such in the nation as are what? That's the key word, conscious, right? That are conscious of need, right? It is a pivotal point in the ministry of Jesus. Just as this, my brothers and sisters, is a pivotal point in this time as well. So, my brothers and sisters, learn the teachings of His Imperial Majesty. More to come, Yah willing. Meditate on that link. Stay tuned for a little bit more on Egyptian yoga and how all of this is connected together in spirit and in truth. Yeshua Shalom, Ras Tafari.